Alright, so it seems like Snowbridge, the Ethereum to Polkadot bridge and vice versa, will be going live. It's actually live right now, but apparently still undergoing some testing. And there has been a great X post written by one of the community members, which I'm going to talk about in this video. We'll also talk a bit about Injective as well, because they've shared some news. But to kick it off with Snowbridge, so this has been in development for more than a year now, probably even 2 years, because I've been hearing talks about Snowbridge for a long time as the common good parachain, now called a system parachain because it's no longer called common good. And what this means is that it is managed by the Polkadot treasury. Ultimately, that's how they're paying their salaries. But I believe it's going to be the Web3 Foundation that's going to be funding Snowbridge, because this actually guarantees funding, consistent funding, whereas with Polkadot's OpenGov system you have to rely on the community voting, although I'm sure there are quite a few whales that used to work for Parity which hold a lot of DOT that can potentially influence the vote in their favor when it comes to paying salaries and things like that. At least that's my understanding, but I think that for Snowbridge it might be the Web3 Foundation. I could be wrong. This is just my assumption, given that Parity no longer exists. Although it does really exist, like there are people that are working for Parity still as developers. It's just not considered an official company anymore, as far as I'm aware, since that announcement. But I do know people that work at Parity and they said everything is as before when it comes to the team, at least for development teams. Okay, so what ultimately Snowbridge is going to do is it's going to allow liquidity to flow from Ethereum over to Polkadot. The question is, will NFTs be migrated over to Polkadot? Will tokens be migrated over to Polkadot? And for what reason? What motivation do you have? If you're a DeFi person, for example, or an NFT person, like what would motivate you to actually make this transfer in the first place if there's no benefit? So I do think that we're going to need to see a lot of benefits happening, at least on the parachain side. So perhaps parachain teams, maybe like Hydra DX or Stella Swap on Moonbeam, might be incentivizing people to be bridging those assets from Ethereum over to Polkadot and over to their individual parachains. It tells us here that it's live, but it's still undergoing final testing with a UI next week. So we're finally going to get a UI, which I'm going to take a look at as well whenever it's going to be released. There's the light client verification for transactions, synchronized states, cryptographic security, no more multi-sig bridges, so centralized custodial bridges like Relay-based bridges, etc., the ones that have been getting hacked, of course. So this is going to be kind of like how XCM transfers work, when you're transferring from one parachain to another, or from the relay chain, which is Polkadot, to a parachain. Now, apparently there are going to be 5 to 10 ERC20 assets which will be supported at launch, Mythical token being one of them, which is a parachain. That's currently on Ethereum. It's an ERC20 token, so that's going to be migrating over. There's also wallet support, Subwallet, Talisman, Polkadot.js. I mean, we already know Subwallet, Talisman, and perhaps even Nova. I'm surprised that Nova isn't mentioned here, but Nova definitely supports ERC20 because I know that they're supporting Ethereum as well. Atomic swaps are being explored, so that's going to be a big one if it happens. So yeah, like I said to you, just like XCM allows different parachains to arbitrarily send messages between each other, that's how it's going to be with Snowbridge, but between different ecosystems, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're talking about parachain bridging, it's more so within an ecosystem because it's all under the Polkadot ecosystem being the layer 0 infrastructure, and then everything else is on top of that, connecting to it with the layer 1s, which are individual blockchains, layer 1 blockchains, just like Ethereum is a layer 1 blockchain. So you can ultimately have Ethereum on Polkadot if they wanted to do that, right? You could potentially have that because that's how it is. Like Moonbeam is kind of like a copy of Ethereum. Same with Astar Network, although Astar are not really that much EVM based anymore. They're more focused towards WASM now. So yeah, this is what you can expect. You could see that the estimated swap cost and swap time is mentioned here as well by Orlando. So he did a great job breaking this down. 20 minutes to 3/4 of an hour, depending on the direction. DOT to Ethereum is going to be $10 to $150 depending on current gas prices and fees. The lower end cost applies to swaps from ETH to DOT. Okay, that's interesting. This was just a lead up to the main announcement that will come next week or before the launch. Beefy synchronous backing and Snowbridge. In case you missed the X Spaces, there's been an X Spaces as well. So yeah, this is good. Like, it's good news. It's about interoperability at the end of the day, right? And Polkadot has always been about interoperability, but the big question is, will this influence the price in a positive way? Because this is the question that many people have, myself included, right? We just haven't seen any positive price action on Polkadot, and this is mostly because of the lack of user interest. With the dead meme airdrop, when we had that hype on X, lots of marketing happening, that had helped Polkadot perform together with the rest of the market. It wasn't left aside. It went to $11.80, right? Close to $12. But unfortunately, the hype has died out and the price has started dumping a lot. That's not to say others haven't dumped too, but Polkadot has definitely suffered more. It had an about 45% drop since the March levels, which is quite painful if you ask me. So yeah, hopefully this is going to bring more users and liquidity, given that Mythical are going to migrate their ERC20 token over to Polkadot through Snowbridge. Perhaps other teams are going to be doing the same if they're interested in exploring Polkadot. But if they don't get love from the ecosystem, they're not going to stay very long. That's not to say that they're forced to stay in any way. They can simply just bridge back out, right? So nobody's actually forcing them to migrate 100%. They can always be on different blockchains. That's the beauty of this interoperability ecosystem when it comes to anything like on Polkadot. It does allow that flexibility to swap in and out. So yeah, we'll have to see how things go and if that's going to be positively affecting the price. Every holder wishes for that, but we'll have to see how the market reacts to it. And finally, I want to talk about Injective here. So Injective has announced today that WholeSwap has processed over $300 million in volume on Injective, and WholeSwap is an innovative DEX aggregator that supports many of the leading DEXs built on Injective. This is like ZenLink on Polkadot. If you can compare it to that, it aggregates liquidity pools from different DEXs into one big DEX, right? So this is ultimately what you can do. So that's a lot of swap volume here, $300 million. You can definitely tell that, Injective is getting a lot of love in general. There's also the burn mechanism, which I really like about Injective. So I think that Injective do have a good shot at revisiting that all-time high of over $50, which it has seen in March. All it needs is really another hyped bull market for altcoins. Like as soon as we get that, we may potentially see Polkadot get to about $10, I think, if we get another one of those March moves. It's probably not going to get to $12, given that the dump has been quite big now, and it has lost a lot of dominance compared to Bitcoin. But I would see Injective revisiting $50 and perhaps even breaking it, because when Injective does move, the moves are wilder. Like Injective went from $25 to $32 in just a couple of days. So that tells you that it's got a lot of fuel in the tank. Whereas unfortunately, DOT just doesn't have that kind of buying power. And it's also to do with the supply, I guess, right? If we ignore the actual selling pressure that we're getting, of course, Injective has some selling pressure too, because you can stake Injective, right? So validators are selling for cost, for maintenance, for making a living of it, perhaps, right? And then there are also stakers who are also selling. Not everyone is compounding, right? So you got to keep that in mind as well. There's definitely some selling when it comes to Injective because there is inflation. But what I'm saying is that the market makers, Jump Crypto, who are behind them, are helping propel the price the moment there are some bullish news or the moment the market does better than usual. Even if it does a bit better, it still performs well. It is great news for Polkadot holders, but we'll have to see how things react, how things perform. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.